In this tutorial, we are going to discuss how we can use Nearpod to really enhance the literacy strategy of writing to learn. Nearpod is essentially a teacher-paced set of lessons or presentations that can really be tailored or created for any topic. In this case, I'm using Nearpod on my web browser, and I'm currently, as you can see, waiting for students to sign in. All students need to do to sign in is go to the Nearpod app on their iPad and put in the PIN number that is up in the left-hand corner. I'm going to show you now what this looks like for a student. So in the student view, they would go ahead and they would put in the Nearpod app their PIN number, and they would go ahead and click OK, which would then go ahead and launch the lesson. Students will have to put in their name, and we're going to call this student 1, and if you wanted to, they would have to put in a PIN number. As you can see, they're set on thank you, and they can't move ahead until the teacher is ready. If I go back to my teacher control, I can see that I now have student 1 into my classroom. I'm going to go over to the right-hand arrow, and I'm going to go ahead and click to progress the lesson. In the first part of the lesson, we do sort of an anticipatory set by having the students do some writing. And the first question for them is, how important is social media in your life? Write 3 to 5 sentences. If we go over to the student iPad, this is what it will look like for students. Students will then go ahead and take a couple minutes to think about social media, and they might say, it is important because, and then in 3 to 5 sentences, they would go ahead and tell me why it was important and click submit. The nice thing about this as a teacher is then when I pull up the students, I can see that student 1 has answered, and I can also see how many students did or did not answer. Being that we only have one student, 100% of the kids have answered. I can also click on the student's text, and I can decide to share it with the class or essentially push it to their iPad. And I think this student had a really good example, so I'm going to share it with the other student iPads. And if we go back to student iPad, we can see that they now have that response. And it's very important to share examples of writing, especially in literature. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to advance to our next portion of the writing. And in this case, we're first asking kids to read an article. This is a part of their learning. They're going to look for main ideas. They're going to be prepared to summarize the article. They're also going to look for keywords or phrases. In this instance, I actually have the article as part of the Nearpod presentation, as you can see right here. It may be beneficial, however, to have a printed copy of this, as students would not be able to toggle back and forth between what is on the screen here and their responses. So here's what it looks like for a student, and they obviously can make it bigger using the iPad, and they would go ahead and they would only be able to read page 1 of this article, because remember, this is teacher-paced. They'd read it, we could stop and talk about it, but then I actually have them writing 5 keywords that stood out to them. And why I say that this is essential to have a paper copy so that students can maybe go back to those keywords had they not written them down. So here's where students will write keywords, and they will go ahead and they will submit those 5 keywords to the class. This brings us to another opportunity to go ahead and share those keywords that we really thought were important or that we really need to address as a class. Moving on, we'll get to the second page of the article, which the students would then go ahead and read. And then after reading the second page, they would need to summarize the main points of the article. Again, we go back to having that paper copy, but we write a well-written summary is what they're going to go ahead and write, and highlighting the main points of the article. We go back to teacher, and we would have that well-written summary written there that we could go back and view. The next option we have is as the teacher view, because this is published, we have a little world screen. And what this means is this is bringing the students out to something on the internet. And in this case, we have brought the students to a video. We want to go a little bit further in their learning beyond what they just read in the article. And here we have an actual video from the Today Show about Miss America responding to the racist comments. We could watch that video as a class, or students can watch that silently, however you choose as a teacher. Following the viewing of that video, we would go ahead and we would advance, and we'd have students respond or write to 3 things they still wonder. Part of one of the writing strategies is really to say things that you are still curious about. And they could say, I don't understand, or they could say, that was enlightening, or they could say anything really that maybe they still wonder about or didn't know to begin with. We could submit that, have a discussion about what students have submitted. And you can see if I write several things, this is what it looks like. And finally, my last question for students is on a scale of 1 to 5, how much does social media impact your everyday life? So we've done this learning, and you could really make this a quiz question, a form of assessment, an exit ticket. For me, it's just a general opinion question. And the student's going to say it's a 4, and they're going to go ahead and submit their answer. And I would have the results populate as in terms of a pie graph. Obviously, with one student, the pie graph is full, but you can see where they said 4. And that would take us to the end of our lesson. So there you can see where we really broke down parts of the writing strategies in terms of using Nearpod app on the iPad.